In the labyrinth of human emotion, few things are as complex and yet as profound as the connections we form with others. There exists a mysterious force, a bond that can ensnare the heart and mind, creating an almost unbreakable attachment. It is a bond that draws women to certain men, often in ways that defy reason. This emotional addiction, while not always understood, is rooted in the deepest recesses of human psychology. In this pursuit of understanding, we must ask ourselves, what drives this unrelenting pull? What is the psychology behind it, and why does it happen to the women who find themselves caught in its grip? In the pursuit of wisdom, we seek not only to understand, but to transcend these forces, learning to control our emotions and elevate ourselves above the cycles of attachment that hold us back from reaching our true potential. Let us examine with clarity and reason this powerful force that shapes our emotional lives and learn how to master it rather than be ruled by it. 1. Understanding emotional addiction in relationships. At the core of every human interaction lies an intricate web of emotions, desires, and impulses. Emotional addiction is not a mere concept, but a profound experience that can consume an individual, shaping their actions, thoughts, and perceptions in ways they may not even realize. In relationships, this addiction manifests when one person becomes emotionally dependent on another to such an extent that they lose sight of their own sense of self-worth and inner peace. The emotional addict becomes like a sailor lost at sea, drifting from one emotional high to the next, tethered only by the fleeting moments of satisfaction provided by the other person. This addiction, however, is not a weakness of character or a lack of strength. It is rooted deeply in the psychology of attachment, the longing for connection, and the human desire to find something greater than themselves in another. It is a natural inclination to seek companionship, understanding, and love. However, when these desires become excessive, when they start to define one's identity and purpose, they transform into an emotional addiction. This is a state where one's happiness, stability, and peace are placed in the hands of another person, usually someone who offers just enough affection, validation, or attention to make them feel momentarily whole. To understand emotional addiction in relationships, we must first examine the psychology of attachment. From the moment we are born, our need for connection is ingrained within us. Infants rely on their caregivers for sustenance, protection, and affection. As we grow, this attachment deepens and diversifies, evolving into romantic, familial, and social bonds. For most people, attachment is a healthy force, promoting cooperation, empathy, and shared growth. However, for some, this desire for attachment can become all-consuming, leading to dependency that leaves them vulnerable to emotional manipulation, control, and ultimately, disillusionment. The term emotional addiction suggests a form of dependence that is as potent as a physical addiction. It is not unlike the cravings of a substance addict, seeking the next fix to fill an emotional void. In romantic relationships, this manifests when one person becomes the center of another's universe. They begin to define themselves through the relationship, and their sense of identity becomes increasingly intertwined with the actions and approval of the other. Every word, every gesture, every interaction with the other person becomes a source of validation or rejection. The emotional addict seeks this validation constantly, unable to find peace without it. This cycle can be deeply damaging. The addict becomes entrapped in a loop where their sense of self is constantly in flux, dictated by the emotional highs and lows that the relationship brings. The relationship may be filled with moments of intense connection, but it is equally filled with moments of uncertainty, anxiety, and fear. The addict clings to the moments of affection and approval, becoming blind to the toxicity of the dependency they are fostering. What was once a healthy connection can quickly transform into an unhealthy obsession, one that erodes their sense of autonomy and their ability to find fulfillment outside the relationship. The Stoic, however, would approach this situation with a different perspective, one rooted in self-control, rationality, and inner peace. For the Stoic, the key to understanding emotional addiction lies in the acceptance of one simple truth: nothing external can provide lasting happiness. The highs and lows of a relationship, no matter how intense, are fleeting. The approval of another is a transient thing, and the pursuit of it can never offer the peace and stability that comes from within. The Stoic approach to emotional addiction is one of detachment, not in the sense of indifference or coldness, but in the sense of emotional independence. True fulfillment, the Stoic teaches, comes from cultivating a deep sense of self-reliance and inner peace, grounded in virtue, wisdom, and self-understanding. The Stoic does not seek external validation to define their worth. They find their worth in their own actions, their own character, and their ability to remain steadfast and resolute in the face of adversity. To understand emotional addiction, one must first recognize that it is rooted in a lack of self-awareness. It is a form of emotional disempowerment that arises from the inability to find peace within oneself. The journey toward healing begins with self-reflection and the cultivation of emotional resilience. By grounding oneself in inner strength, one can begin to break free from the cycle of emotional dependency and rediscover their sense of autonomy and self-worth. This is the first step toward transcending emotional addiction. The recognition that true peace is not found in the approval or affection of others, but in the quiet mastery of one's own mind and emotions. 2. The power of emotional connection. Human beings are not solitary creatures. We are inherently social, driven by an intrinsic need to connect with others. This need for connection, while natural and vital, holds great power over us. It is this power that can shape our emotions, drive our decisions, and even define the course of our lives. Emotional connection is a force that can uplift and inspire, but it is also a force that, if misunderstood or misused, can ensnare us in ways that we may never have imagined. The power of emotional connection lies not just in the bond it creates between two individuals, but in its ability to shape how we perceive ourselves, others, and the world around us. When we connect with another person on a deep emotional level, it can bring a sense of belonging, purpose, and understanding that we may not find elsewhere. This connection is often felt as a powerful and sometimes overwhelming force, an intense bond that transcends logic and reason. We may feel as though we are a part of something greater, something that brings us fulfillment and meaning. This emotional connection, however, is not always a stable force. It is like the ebb and flow of the tides, subject to the pull of external circumstances and internal emotions. The moment we form an emotional connection with someone, we expose ourselves to the unpredictable nature of human interaction. We open ourselves to love, but we also open ourselves to pain, disappointment, and heartache. The very force that brings us joy can also bring us sorrow. And this duality is what makes emotional connection so potent. When a woman becomes emotionally connected to a man, the bond that forms can create a profound sense of security, stability, and happiness. The emotional highs that arise from moments of closeness and intimacy can be exhilarating, But when this connection begins to shift, when the emotions grow more unpredictable, the very same power that once felt like a source of strength can transform into a source of emotional turmoil. It is in this instability that emotional addiction can take root. The highs become addictive, and the lows become unbearable. Each interaction, each word, each gesture becomes imbued with an emotional significance that can overwhelm the rational mind. The woman becomes emotionally hooked to the man, seeking more of the emotional highs, unable to escape the lows that inevitably follow. At its core, emotional connection is a two-edged sword. It can lead to personal growth, deep understanding, and fulfillment, but it can also expose the deepest vulnerabilities of the human heart. The key to navigating this power lies in understanding the nature of connection itself and the role it plays in our emotional lives. Emotional connection is not inherently destructive, but it becomes so when it is pursued without wisdom or self-awareness. The Stoic approach to emotional connection is one of balance. The Stoic does not deny the value of emotional bonds, but they approach them with clarity and discernment. The Stoic recognizes that while emotional connection can enhance their life, it cannot become the source of their happiness or fulfillment. They understand that all external connections, whether romantic, familial, or social, are fleeting and subject to change. The Stoic does not allow their sense of peace to be held hostage by another person's behavior or emotions. Instead, they focus on cultivating an internal sense of stability that is impervious to the fluctuations of external relationships. To fully understand the power of emotional connection, one must first recognize that true emotional strength is not found in dependence on others, but in the cultivation of inner peace and self-awareness. The Stoic finds balance in relationships by acknowledging the impermanence of emotional bonds. They understand that love, affection, and connection are fleeting moments in the grand span of time. The Stoic does not seek to possess or control these emotions, but instead seeks to enjoy them for what they are, a gift that adds depth and richness to life, but not the foundation upon which their entire emotional state rests. By approaching emotional connections with wisdom, we are able to enjoy their beauty without becoming enslaved by them. The true power of emotional connection, then, is not in the intensity of the bond itself, but in our ability to remain grounded, centered, and independent in the face of its pull. Through this understanding, we free ourselves from the shackles of emotional addiction, and we can form relationships that are based not on need, but on mutual respect, growth, and shared wisdom. The power of emotional connection becomes a source of strength rather than a source of weakness. 3. Why certain men trigger intense emotional responses. Human nature, with all its complexities, is driven by a multitude of forces that shape how we respond to the world around us. In relationships, certain individuals have an almost magnetic ability to trigger powerful emotional reactions in others. These men, often unknowingly, become the focal points of intense emotional experiences that can range from euphoria to despair. The question arises, why do some men trigger such extreme emotional responses while others elicit only calm indifference? The answer lies not just in the character or actions of the man, but in the deeper psychological forces at play within the woman herself. The root of these intense emotional reactions can be traced to the way we, as human beings, perceive and respond to certain traits in others. For a woman, a man who exudes confidence, mystery, or emotional availability can stir something deep within her, These qualities can invoke a sense of attraction that goes beyond physical appearance or superficial charm. They tap into the primal aspects of human psychology, the need for security, emotional connection, and the desire to be seen and understood. When a man possesses these qualities, they can trigger feelings of deep emotional engagement, even in the most stoic of individuals. However, this emotional trigger is not always positive. A man who demonstrates inconsistency, emotional unavailability, or aloofness can provoke equally intense emotional responses, albeit of a different nature. These men often trigger feelings of longing, frustration, and even anxiety. The psychological tension between desire and unavailability creates an emotional cocktail that is difficult to escape. The more a woman seeks connection, the more elusive the man becomes, and this dynamic only serves to deepen the emotional dependency. The emotional addict clings to the hope of gaining the approval or affection of the man, believing that his love or validation is the key to her happiness. This emotional intensity is not always rooted in rational thought. In fact, it is often driven by unconscious needs and unresolved emotional patterns from the past. The women who find themselves triggered by certain men may be responding to the traits that mirror emotional dynamics from their childhood or past relationships. It could be the archetype of the bad boy, the emotionally unavailable figure that represents a challenge to be conquered. Or it could be the nurturing, protective figure that a woman feels a deep need to be cared for by, mirroring the protective roles she may have longed for in her past. These unconscious desires and patterns, while deeply embedded, can cause us to form attachments to individuals who trigger these emotional responses. Individuals who may not be emotionally available or healthy for us. The Stoic understanding of this emotional response, however, is to view it not as a force to be succumbed to, but as an opportunity for self-reflection and growth. The Stoic does not see these emotional triggers as something to be feared or avoided, but rather as a signal of inner work to be done. When faced with a man who triggers intense emotions, the Stoic would ask, "Why am I responding in this way? What within me is being activated by this person?" This self-inquiry allows one to examine the deeper emotional needs and desires that may be driving the response. The Stoic knows that it is not the man who has power over their emotions, but their own attachment to the emotions that are being stirred. By understanding that these intense emotional responses are not solely a reflection of the other person's actions, but also of one's own internal landscape, the Stoic is empowered to take control of their emotions. Rather than becoming emotionally addicted to someone who triggers these intense feelings, the Stoic seeks to understand why they are triggered and what lessons can be learned from the experience. The Stoic approach is one of emotional mastery, recognizing that the external world, including other people, cannot dictate one's emotional state. This understanding allows the Stoic to engage in relationships not from a place of need or dependency, but from a place of inner strength and self-awareness. In relationships, the Stoic seeks balance. They allow themselves to feel deeply, to experience the emotional highs and lows that come with human connection, but they do not become ensnared by them. They recognize that emotions are transient, that the feelings stirred by another person are fleeting and not a permanent reflection of their own worth or happiness. By cultivating emotional resilience and detachment, the Stoic is able to navigate these intense emotional responses with clarity and equanimity. They understand that true peace does not come from controlling others, but from controlling the emotional responses within themselves. regardless of the external triggers. 4. The science behind emotional addiction. To truly understand the depths of emotional addiction, we must first turn to the fundamental workings of the human mind and body. Our emotions, thoughts, and behaviors are not simply abstract concepts. They are deeply rooted in the biological processes that govern our existence. The science behind emotional addiction reveals a powerful truth. Our emotional responses are driven by complex neural pathways, chemical reactions, and evolutionary mechanisms designed to help us survive. Yet these same processes can also trap us in cycles of dependence and longing that are difficult to break free from. At the heart of emotional addiction is the brain's reward system, a network of structures that regulate feelings of pleasure and reinforcement. When we form a bond with someone, whether through love, affection, or validation, the brain releases neurotransmitters such as dopamine and oxytocin, chemicals that are associated with pleasure, bonding, and feelings of connection. Dopamine, in particular, plays a crucial role in the reinforcement of behavior. When we experience something rewarding, our brain releases dopamine, which creates a feeling of pleasure and satisfaction. This makes us want to repeat the behavior that led to the release of dopamine, forming a cycle of reinforcement. In relationships, this can create a powerful loop where the emotional highs of connection, affection, or approval trigger the release of dopamine, making us crave more of the same experiences. However, this cycle can become addictive. When a woman experiences intense emotional highs in a relationship, whether it be the euphoric feeling of being loved, desired, or validated, her brain begins to associate the presence of the man with the release of these pleasurable chemicals. The more the brain experiences these emotional highs, the more it craves them. This creates an emotional dependency where the individual begins to rely on the other person to provide the emotional stimulation needed to feel happiness and satisfaction. As this cycle continues, the need for these emotional highs intensifies, and the woman becomes increasingly dependent on the emotional responses of the man to maintain a sense of well-being. Yet, as with any addiction, the cycle is not one of constant pleasure. When the emotional connection falters or becomes inconsistent, the brain's reward system is thrown into imbalance. The emotional addict may experience withdrawal-like symptoms, anxiety, restlessness, depression, and a strong craving for the emotional fix they once received. This creates a profound emotional instability as the person swings between emotional highs and lows, never able to find lasting peace or satisfaction. This cycle can become all-consuming as the individual continuously chases the next emotional high while remaining tethered to the emotional roller coaster of the relationship. From a Stoic perspective, understanding the science behind emotional addiction can provide valuable insight into the nature of human attachment and emotional response. The Stoic would approach this understanding not with judgment or fear, but with wisdom and discernment. They recognize that the brain's reward system is a powerful tool, one that can be harnessed for growth, fulfillment, and connection, but also one that can lead us astray if we allow ourselves to become enslaved by it. The Stoics' approach is rooted in self-awareness and emotional regulation. The key to transcending emotional addiction lies not in resisting emotions altogether, but in understanding their impermanence and the role they play in our lives. By recognizing that emotions are, in many ways, chemical responses triggered by external events, the Stoic is able to detach from the need for external validation and emotional highs. The Stoic understands that their true source of peace does not come from the fluctuating tides of emotion, but from the steady anchor of reason, virtue, and self-mastery. In this understanding, the Stoic is empowered to break the cycle of emotional addiction. They learn to detach from the need for constant emotional validation, recognizing that the cravings of the brain's reward system are transient. Instead of allowing their happiness to be dictated by external sources, the Stoic seeks to cultivate a deep, unshakable peace that comes from within. By focusing on developing their inner character and strength, the Stoic is able to maintain emotional equilibrium regardless of the external circumstance. True freedom lies in understanding the nature of emotional addiction and choosing to transcend it. The Stoic's path is one of self-control, clarity, and mastery over the emotional fluctuations that can easily entrap us. They do not deny their emotions, but they do not allow them to control them. By embracing this wisdom, they break free from the cycle of emotional dependency, finding lasting peace and fulfillment in their own strength and resilience. 5. The role of attachment and chemistry in emotional bonds. Human beings are inherently relational, designed by nature to form deep attachments to others. These attachments, whether in friendships, family bonds, or romantic relationships, are a fundamental part of our psychological makeup. From the earliest stages of life, we are conditioned to seek connection, to find security in the presence of others, and to bond in ways that provide us with a sense of safety and belonging. However, the role of attachment and chemistry in emotional bonds is far more intricate than merely a desire for connection. It is a complex dance of biological, emotional, and psychological factors that combine to form the foundation of our most intense relationships. In understanding this, we can gain insight into the powerful forces that influence our emotional lives. At the heart of attachment is the need for security, a desire to be seen, heard, and valued by another. This is most evident in the early attachment bonds we form as children with our caregivers. The consistency and care shown by our primary attachment figures shape our view of the world, teaching us whether the world is a safe place or one to be feared. As we mature, these early experiences shape the way we engage with others in adulthood. When a woman forms an emotional bond with a man, she may seek the security that she learned to associate with attachment in her formative years. She may look to him to fill the voids left by past emotional wounds, seeking comfort, reassurance, and love. This search for emotional safety can become so ingrained that it leads to a deep attachment, sometimes to an individual who may not be capable of providing the stability she desires. The chemistry between two people, often described as the spark or attraction, adds another layer to this dynamic. The human body is a vessel for a variety of chemical processes that influence our emotions and behaviors. In relationships, this chemistry is driven by a complex cocktail of hormones, including dopamine, oxytocin, and serotonin, all of which influence how we feel in the presence of someone else. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter most commonly associated with pleasure, plays a central role in the early stages of romantic attraction. When we are around someone we find desirable, our brain releases dopamine, creating feelings of excitement and joy. This biochemical response leads to the rush of infatuation, the excitement of new love, and the desire to be close to that person. However, as with all chemical processes, this initial rush can fade over time. The more a woman's emotional bond to a man is driven by chemical highs, the more she may become dependent on those fleeting moments of exhilaration. This dependency can create an emotional addiction as she seeks to relive the chemical rush of infatuation again and again. In addition to dopamine, oxytocin, often referred to as the love hormone, plays a critical role in the formation of emotional bonds. Oxytocin is released during physical touch, intimacy, and bonding moments, and it fosters a sense of trust and connection. When a woman experiences physical closeness with a man, oxytocin strengthens her emotional attachment, deepening the bond between them. This is why physical affection, such as hugging, kissing, or even a simple touch, can feel so emotionally fulfilling. The release of oxytocin creates a sense of warmth, attachment, and emotional closeness, which reinforces the desire to stay close to that individual. The problem arises when these bonds are formed with individuals who may not reciprocate the emotional depth required to maintain a stable, healthy relationship. The addiction to the emotional highs that come from oxytocin-driven affection can cause a woman to hold on to a relationship even when it no longer serves her well-being. However, attachment and chemistry alone do not create lasting emotional bonds. The Stoic view emphasizes that true emotional strength and stability come from the cultivation of virtue and inner peace, rather than relying on external circumstances or fleeting chemical responses. The Stoic understands that emotional attachment, while natural, cannot be the foundation of one's happiness or security. Relationships based solely on attachment and chemistry are fragile, as they are rooted in impermanent and unpredictable factors. These relationships may provide moments of joy and connection, but they are also susceptible to the whims of emotion, external influences, and changing desires. The Stoic approach to attachment is one of moderation and self-awareness. The Stoic does not seek to sever emotional bonds or relationships, but rather to cultivate a deep sense of inner strength and self-reliance. They recognize that while attachment and chemistry play an undeniable role in human relationships, they cannot define one's sense of self-worth or emotional well-being. The Stoic learns to detach from the need for constant validation and instead seeks to find peace within themselves. They understand that their emotional stability should not be determined by the presence or absence of another person, but by their own ability to maintain equanimity in the face of life's inevitable changes. The role of attachment and chemistry in emotional bonds, therefore, must be understood within the larger context of personal growth and emotional resilience. When we learn to understand the forces that drive our emotional responses, we are better equipped to navigate relationships with wisdom and clarity. Attachment and chemistry may be powerful, but they are only one part of the equation. True emotional strength comes from within, from the ability to remain grounded in one's values, to cultivate emotional independence, and to engage with others from a place of inner peace rather than need or dependence. By mastering ourselves, we can form relationships that are based on mutual respect, shared growth, and authentic connection, rather than fleeting emotional highs or unhealthy dependency. 6. The illusion of external validation. In the journey of life, one of the greatest illusions we encounter is the belief that our worth is defined by the approval, attention, or affection of others. This illusion is particularly potent in romantic relationships, where the desire to be seen, valued, and adored can easily become intertwined with our sense of self. We often look to others for validation, seeking reassurance in their words, their touch, their interest, or their love. But this reliance on external validation, while natural, is ultimately a trap. A fleeting, unstable foundation upon which to build our sense of identity and happiness. The search for validation from others is deeply embedded in our psychological makeup. From the moment we are born, we seek the comfort and approval of our caregivers, and this early need for external affirmation becomes the basis for many of our future relational patterns. As we grow older, the desire for validation shifts to a more complex form, but the core need remains the same. We want to be seen and recognized by others as worthy, important, and lovable. When we receive affirmation from others, our self-esteem is temporarily lifted, and we feel a sense of belonging and security. In relationships, the approval of a partner often becomes the ultimate source of this affirmation, providing a sense of purpose and fulfillment. However, this external validation is an illusion, as it is inherently unstable. People are unpredictable, and the opinions or affection of others can change in an instant. A relationship can go from fulfilling to painful, from secure to uncertain, with nothing more than a shift in circumstances or feelings. When our sense of worth is dependent on the fluctuating emotions or actions of others, we are at the mercy of forces that are beyond our control. We cannot rely on someone else's opinion of us to define our value, for we are constantly subject to the changing tides of human nature. This is where the danger lies. The more we attach our sense of self to the validation we receive from others, the more we risk losing ourselves in the process. The Stoic understands this fundamental truth, that true self-worth cannot be based on external factors. The Stoics' wisdom lies in recognizing that their value is not determined by the opinions, affections, or judgments of others, but by their own character, their actions, and their adherence to virtue. The Stoic seeks to build an internal sense of self-worth that is unwavering and independent of the changing dynamics of relationships. They know that no one has the power to define who they are except for themselves. The external world, including the people we love, may offer praise, affection, or recognition, but the Stoic does not let these things dictate their emotional state or sense of value.